Hello friends, in this video we are going to see about exception in Java. So what is exception is whenever we get an error during the runtime that we call as exception. For example, when I want to print something in the console window, we will say system.out.println and then we will write something hello. Right, likewise we will write, and if it doesn't put a semicolon here, so that is a syntax error. So Java follows some syntax. So if we make mistake in the syntax, that will be notified during compile time. So those we call as errors. But during the execution time, if you face any error, that is called as exception. During execution time, if you face any problem, that we call as exception. Okay, so let us see an example for this so we understand. For example, if I say integer a is equal to 10 and b is equal to 2 and c. Okay, C. Then I'll say C equal to A divided by B. So this is the two statement which I write in Java. But if you see here, all are syntactically correct, right? All are syntactically correct. So now instead of writing 2 to B, let me write 0 to B. So if you see the code, actually it is syntactically correct but logically wrong. So this error will not be found during the compile time. So compile time, it will just check the syntax. So syntax is correct. But during the execution time, it can check, it can find out this error. It will find, okay, logically we cannot divide a number by 0. So those time when it finds this kind of logical error, we call it as exception. Okay. So we'll see some example on it. So before that, there are two types of exceptions are there. Two types of exception. They are checked exception, checked exception, and the next one is unchecked exception. So what does this checked exception means? If the exception is checked during the compile time itself, means we call this checked exception. Okay, if the exception is checked during the run time or execution time, means we call it as unchecked exception. So we will see example for all these things so that you will understand it better. So let me, as I said, let me have an example. Let me say integer a is equal to 10 and b is equal to, let me say as 5, and then c. Okay, so see here, if I make any syntax mistake during the before I execute it itself, that is the compile, it automatically, since it is an ID, it is integrated with the compiler, it shows us the error. So I can correct it off. And then I can say C equal to A divided by B. So if you see here, there is no problem. Syntactically, everything is perfect. So let me display the output of it. I'll say the result is, I'll say plus C, right? So if I run this program, you can see I will get the proper output. I can say the result is 2. 10 divided by 5 is 2, so no problem, right? Now what I'm going to do is, instead of writing 5, I'm going to write 0 for B. So now there is an exception. So if you see during the compile time, there is no problem. There is no error is shown here. Even though there is, it is logically wrong, it doesn't show any error. But when I run this, it shows us exception. What is the exception it show? It shows arithmetic exception, right? So arithmetically it is wrong. So this exception is found automatically by the runtime environment, and it is throwing an object. Whenever there is an exception is created, that object will be created. So here you can see the object of arithmetic exception class is created. There is none to handle the exception. For example, if I have some statement after this, let me say as statement 1. Statement 1. Similarly, you consider it may be any kind of statement after that. Okay. So if I have an exception, if it is not handled, then the rest of the statements will not be executed. If I run this code, If you see the rest of the statement, statement 1, statement 2, nothing is executed. So once an exception is encountered, immediately the program execution stopped, right? The rest of the code is not executed. So if we have to handle this exception properly. To handle this in Java, we have some 5 keywords like try, catch, finally, throw, and throws. So these are the 5 keywords to handle this exception. So here, how will I handle this exception? We know that this is the line which creates the problem or create the exception. So what will I do is, I will surround this line or this set of codes with a try. Okay, so now I surrounded it, but still it's showing an error. So immediately after the try, I have to put the catch. Okay, so and what kind of exception I am trying, I am expecting out of it is arithmetic exception. So I'm going to cache the object of arithmetic exception here. Inside the arithmetic exception, I can write the statement to handle it. So I can say whatever the remedy I want to do for it, I can write. I can say check the input, or you can say check the denominator, or whatever you want to say, you can say. So here is how I handle it. So I have to put the code which I suspect to create exception inside the try. Immediately after the try, I have to put a catch. You cannot have any system.out.println even in this place also. That will show you error. You cannot have. See, if I say hi here, it shows you error because immediately after the try block, you have to put a catch in between. I cannot put any other statement after the try. So this is how. Now if I run this program, so the exception will be properly handled. See, again I have the denominator at 0. So we know that we cannot divide a number by 0. Here we have an exception. Immediately the runtime environment encounter an exception, an object will be created and the object will be thrown to this catch block. Now we have handled it. So it will come through the object to it, and that since it is an arithmetic exception exactly matched to it, it will be caught by this object and it come here and it's execute the catch block, and the rest of the statement present after that will also be smoothly executed. So it will not terminate your program in between, but it will execute the rest of the code when we handle the exception. That is the advantage of it. So then next question is, can I have only one catch after the try? No, we can have multiple catches after the try. So let us try one more thing. Let me get input from a user. So for that, I'm going to use a scanner class. We know that scanner class will help us to get the input from the user. So I have created an object for the scanner class. Whenever you use a scanner, we have to import the necessary package for it. Now I'm going to ask uh, enter a integer number. Enter the integer number, or enter a number, or whatever it may be. So I'm trying to get an integer number. So using the scanner object, using next stage, I'm going to get the integer number. Okay, so let me try and run this program. Okay. Since already we have an arithmetic exception, it is stopping there. So I have removed the arithmetic exception now. So 10 divided by 10, we will get 1. So the result, there is no exception. It is smoothly executed. So we got the result as 1, right? And then it is asking enter the integer number. So instead of writing an integer number, I am going to give a string as a input. So it is expecting us to get a integer, but I am going to give a string. So it is a mismatch of input, right? So let us see what happened here. So it creates. So syntactically it is correct, okay? But during the runtime, there is a mismatch. There is an exception. This is what exception is. It says input mismatch exception. Okay, so there is a mismatch. And now you can also see the rest of the code which is present in my code, which is statement 1, statement 3 is also not executed. So whenever there is an exception, if it is not properly handled, your program will be terminated in between. So what can I do? Here we have specifically written a cache to handle only arithmetic kind of exception. Now I have another kind of exception also, which is input mismatch exception. So I'm going to handle that as well. So this is, since it is present in another package, just importing it. And here I can say, check your input or enter proper input data type. Proper input, proper input. Let us start with it. Okay. So now let me run it. Okay, so first arithmetic exception is also not there because I'm not dividing it by 0 and it is asking an integer number. Let me again try type a string, but still now it is properly handled. See here, input mismatch exception is handling it and it shows enter proper input. So that is displayed here, and since I handled the exception now properly, the rest of the code is also get executed, and here it is. Right, this is how we can, if I handle it properly, then my program will be smoothly executed. Say for example, when you go to an ATM to take a money, what kind of exception may occur? The program is properly executed and you inserted and you gave that you're going to do a transaction and you're going to do 10,000, you're going to send 10,000 to your friend's account. So I just gave the amount 10,000. It got deducted from your account. In between, there is a network issue. Because of that, it got deducted from your account and it is not credited in your friend's account. So there is an exception, unexpected problem occurred during the execution time. So we have to handle it. Otherwise, what happened? The 10,000 will be lost. So what can I do? I have to write a proper exception handling mechanism so that since because of a network issue, the deducted amount from the sender should be sent back to the sender itself. Okay, otherwise I have to do the necessary steps. If I don't handle it properly, if the program execution stop in between, then there will be a loss. So that is why this unexpected errors during the execution should be properly handled using this exception handling. So that is why we are doing all these things. Now we learn for a single try we can have more than one catch. Okay, and also for example I am going to remove it. If I have a same kind of error, if I give a wrong value to the integer, then it cannot be handled by arithmetic exception that we saw, right? So there is another way to handle it. There is a parent class called exception which can handle any type of exception. Okay, so I'm going to say this this is exception dash. Okay, so here this exception can handle any type of exception. Okay, so let us run again. And I'm going to give a wrong input for the integer. Let me say hi. So even then, I didn't put input mismatch exception. I gave only exception, but still, this exception catch block can even handle it. And this line which I have written inside the catch block is properly executed. This is exception catch. And also the rest of the code present after the catch block is also executed. So from this, what you can understand is this exception can catch any kind of exception, even or if I don't write this arithmetic exception. Okay, let us create an arithmetic exception problem. And that could also be handled by, see, but still, even though I divide a number by 0, that is an exception that can also be handled by exception class. Okay, so what this, from this you can understand this exception can handle any type of exception. Now let us interchange its position. Instead of writing it second, I am going to write this exception in the beginning itself. So here you can immediately encounter an error because every exception can be caught by this block. So this block become unreachable. So whenever you have a multiple catches, then you have to make sure that the most specific exception catch should be written first, then the most general exception catch block should be written at the last. So that if the exception object created inside the try block doesn't match to any of the specific catch block, then it can be handled by the exception. So this order is also very important. All the specific catches you have to put in the beginning, finally you have to put the exception. So for a single try you can have any number of catches. So we learn now this two keyword. The next is finally. So let us put the finally keyword here after the catch. So what does this finally means? Like we can make sure certain set of statements are executed for sure. Let me say system dot out dot println. So I'm going to say that finally will be executed. Even there is an exception. If there is no exception, this finally block will be executed. So let us try with this with an exception. Let me try. Mm, let me create a mismatch input. For example, let me say hi. So there is an exception here. So this is caught by this catch block, and this says this exception. This is exception, this is exception catch, and then this finally block is also executed. This is finally block, right? This executed. So if there is an exception, the finally block is executed. Now once again we'll run the same program without any exception. So now there is no exception actually. There is no arithmetic exception because we are dividing it with proper denominator, and the input also we gave the proper integer. Now there is no exception. Even though there is no exception, this finally block is executed. So what is the purpose of finally block? So if you want to make sure certain codes to be executed, if there is no exception or exception, those code you can keep inside finally, so that we can make sure those codes are, those statements are executed for sure. So that is the use of finally. Even without the catch also you can have finally, there is no problem. So but after the try, either you have to have a catch or a finally, that is very important. So that is the purpose of finally keyword. I hope you got it. So this exception are automatically found by who? The runtime environment itself. Even I didn't say there is an arithmetic exception here, and also here I didn't say there is an input mismatch exception. Like that, there is many other predefined exceptions are available in Java. Even though we didn't explicitly say here there is an exception, the runtime environment had properly found there is an exception, and then it showed it, right? And it created an object. That particular object is caught by the corresponding catch block, either this or this. Now, whenever we want to create an exception for certain case, in that case also we can able to create a user-defined exception. So let's learn how to create a user-defined exception. Let me create a fresh one for you. Okay. So now I have this a fresh new main function. Again, I have a certain statements here. Okay. So now I'm going to, for example, let us say age exception. For example, we know that the eligibility to vote is 18 years old, right? So if the age is less than 18 means we should not allow to vote them. But the runtime environment doesn't know this conditions, right? It knows already predefined exception alone. So we have to say the runtime, we have to define our own kind of exception. So how we are going to do that is by the case of throw. So let's see an example. I'm going to ask the user to enter their age. So I'm going to say enter your age. Okay, so I'm going to receive the input in a variable age, and it is an integer. So I'm going to say scanner object dot next in to get the integer. So now I got the age from the user. Now I'm going to check if the age is less than 18. I have to say throw an exception because this condition compile runtime environment doesn't know. Okay, so we have to say that this is an exception condition. So when we want to manually throw an exception, we have to use a keyword called throw. And also I already told, whenever the random environment automatically find an exception, create an object. Now we have to create that object. So I'm going to create an object called age exception. Age exception. So now again, this is how we manually create an exception. This is a syntax throw. Followed by the throw, there should be an object. Now here it shows an error. Why? Because for what we will create an object? For class only we create an object. There is no class called age exception. Now we are going to create a class with the name age exception. Okay, so let us create a class age exception. And the very important thing is it need to be a child of exception class. Already I told you extends. We know if you want to inherit something, we will be using extend keyword, and there is a predefined parent class called exception. So now you can understand I have created a class for age, but still, and here if you want, as usual, it's a normal class, but it is inheriting the exception. You can have a constructor, and let us make it as a default constructor. I'll say system.out.println and the voting age is 18 or above, right? So I just written a statement here. Okay, so a class for this is ready, but still see here it's showing error. Why? We know that this line is creating an exception. Whenever there is an exception, it should be properly handled, right? So how will you handle it? Now we have to use the try catch block. So we have to put a try. So whichever code is making a exception, we have to surround it by try. So try is there, but still again it shows error because immediately after the try, we have to put a catch. Now, what kind of object is created by this exception? Age exception. So here I have to create that exception here by that class name and the object for it. Now I can say here you can whatever thing you want to put you can put. Now I can say check your age. Check your age. So done. So now we have created our own exception. The exception name is age exception. So we have manually throw the created exception object, and whenever we create an object, we know the constructor will be automatically called. And here, when we create an object, this constructor will be called. This line will be executed. After it finishes the execution of the line, this object will be thrown to the catch, and this statement will be executed. After that, the normal flow of execution will be continued. So if the age is greater than 18, then we can put a else statement as well. You can say system.out.println. You can vote, like that. We are just telling. Okay. So now let us run this program. One second. So it is asking enter your age. Let me say my age is 12. So it's no, whenever the age is less than 18, it has to throw an exception. Here an exception object is created. This object will call what this constructor, and inside the constructor we have written this, the voting age is 18 or above. So this is displayed. The voting age is 18 or above, and then followed by it will go to the corresponding catch block. Since there is an exception, the else block will not be executed. And then here we have a check your age. So check your age is printed. Since we handled the exception properly, the rest of the line in our code is also got executed, and this is got printed. So this is how we have to create a user defined or custom exception. This is called as user defined exception or custom exception. Hope you got it. Okay. So now, even you can pass some arguments also. You can pass the age here. So here we have to, it is showing error because this should match to the constructor. So let us receive the age here. And you can say the voting age is 18. And I can say, but your age is, I can say, but, um, but your age is I can say the present age of the user, but your age is, I'll say, plus age. So now even you can display the age entered by the user. So let me say enter your age. I'm going to say the age is 17. So you can say the voting age is 18 or above, but your age is 17. So you can even send an argument here in the object so that it will pass the constructor. Okay. So now we have learned how to use try, catch, finally, and throw. Now let us learn how to use this throws. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a function. Let me take all this thing away. Let me create a new one for you to clearly understand again. Mm. So let me create a function here inside this class. Let me say void. I am going to make it as a check age is my function name, where I'm going to get age as my input. And here what we did there inside the main function, we are going to do inside here. I'm going to say if the age is less than 18, I'm going to create an exception. So how will you create a manual exception? I'll say throw new, the name of the exception which we created is age exception, and we can pass it. And you can see immediately there will be an error because there is an exception created but it is not handled. So how will we handle it? We'll put a try and surround this immediately after the try, put a catch, and the expected exception by the catch is age exception. Put an object for it, and inside that you can say a suggestion or whatever remedy you want to say. We can say check your age. So now inside this function we have we are checking the age and we are making an exception and we handled it. And how will we call this function? Whenever you want to call any function inside a class which is a non-static member, means since main is a non-static member, if you want to call a non-static member, first we have to create an object. Let me create an object. Using the object, let us call the function check age. Okay, so as usual, now we are having the same thing. Let me say the age as 16. So there is an exception. Age is less than 18. So there is an exception. It will first call the constructor. So it is displaying the statement. Followed by that, it will go to the catch. Because of this object, it will go here and check your age is displayed. After that, the normal statements are got executed. This is as usual. For example, if I run again and if I give an age which is greater than 18, it says, so here we didn't write else part. So if we write the else part, let us write the else part of this if statement. Else, we can say system dot out dot println, and you can write you can vote. So we can write a statement. So now if I run it and if I enter the age as 19, it says you can vote. If I enter age which is less than 18, then it will handle the exception and it will give the suggestion how to overcome it, and there is a smooth execution of program. So now let us learn how to use the throws. Okay, what I'm going to do is here. Now this here we are checking, we created the age, but now I'm not interested to handle this exception inside the class. Okay, I'm going to have the else part also, no problem in that. So yeah, you can say you can vote, can vote, but what I'm going to do is I'm not going to handle the exception inside, which means how will you hand putting inside the try, catch, and you can say necessary steps for it. But in this case, I'm not interested to handle the exception inside the function. So, but then how can I rectify this error is I can throw this object outside of this function. So which object I have to throw? The object created by this exception is age exception. So I am going to throw this object outside of this function. So that's how we have to use the keyword throws. Which object we are going to throw? This object. Okay, this is the exception object. So here everything is now clear, no error. But here you can see a error where it is called, there we have an error. So how we can handle is, this is the line which create an exception. So here I have to handle, here it is throwing the exception object, right? So it comes to the place where this function is called. So this is the place where the function is called. So here I have to handle it. How will I handle? Here I'll put a try. Try, and immediately after the try we have to put the catch, and the object we have here is age exception, and whatever necessary steps you or statement you want to put, you can put, and you can say check keyword age. All the rest of the things are same. So now you hope you got it. This is the place how we can use throws. So this function is not going to handle the exception. So I throw the exception out of the function, and the place where it is called will handle the exception. Okay. So we'll give other name because another one is there. So now if I run this program, same thing, you will get the same kind of output only, but we handle this time in different way. So if I gave the age is 4, the voting age is 18 or above, but your age is 4. So first the constructor is executed, followed by, so first it will come here, right? The main function will be executed. It is getting the age. We enter the age as 4. So it come here. It is calling the function. Age will be sent here. We'll check the age. If it is less than 18, we create an object. So this place or will call the constructor. So it goes to the constructor. Inside the constructor, this statement will be executed. Then it come back to the here. Since it is not handled here and it is throwing out, it will go to the place where it is called, and here we have cache to handle the object, and here we get check here age. And after since we handle the exception properly, the rest of the code will also be executed properly. So this is how we can handle exception in Java using this 5 keywords: try, catch, finally, throw, and throw. So when we want to manually throw an exception, we have to use a keyword throw, and when we want to throw an exception outside of the function, you have to use the keyword throws. So this is called as unchecked exception. We already saw there are two types of exceptions are there: checked exception and unchecked exception. So here we have a unchecked exception because this exception will be checked only during the runtime. Let us quickly see an example for unchecked checked exception. What I said checked exception means? Checked exception means the exception will be checked during the compile time itself. So further, let me take an example. I'm going to create a file. So to create a file, we have to first create an object for file. And here I'm going to access a file, create a file called my file dot txt. And so whenever I create a file, I have to import the necessary header file, that is IO. Now I am going to create an object e dot create new file. Now you can see there is an error coming. What does it say? It says unhandled exception type IO exception. So it says in the compile time itself, it is showing us the exception. So if an exception is checked during the compile time, we call it as checked exception. This kind of exception is called checked exception. So how can I handle it? If I'm either you surrounded by try catch, or you can also do the same thing like throws keyword. So I'm going to throws it IO exception outside of this. So for that also I have to import the necessary header file. So now the error is gone. Since I throw this exception outside of the main function, there is no error. So otherwise, if you are not interested to throw like this, you have to handle it. How will we handle? You have to put a try here, and followed by the try, you have to put a catch, and the exception which you are expecting here is IO exception, and you can say the necessary statement inside. So now again the error is gone. So either you have to handle using try catch, or you have to throws it outside of the function. So this type of exception is called checked exception because here the exception is checked during the compile time itself. If the exception is checked during the runtime, then we call this unchecked exception. So hope you got what is exception, how to handle the exception using the 5 keywords of Java, and also two types of exception, checked exception and unchecked exception. Also, we learned how to create a user-defined exception or checked exception, how to throw the exception manually as well. Hope you got it. Thank you. God bless you.